The nursing home called at 3:07 a.m. on a Tuesday, and Carol, the night supervisor, said, "Mr. Coleman passed an hour ago, but he left something in his nightstand for you," and I was stunned because my father hadn't spoken to me in 23 years. This isn't the story you think it is. It isn't about a surprise inheritance or a hidden fortune, and I didn't walk out of that facility with a check, because what Carol handed me was a small, worn envelope containing a single piece of paper with a name written on it. I am David Coleman, 51 years old, a high school janitor in Toledo, Ohio, and I have spent my entire adult life believing my father, Arthur Coleman, abandoned me the day I turned 18 and never looked back. We lived on Maplewood Avenue in the Old Orchard neighborhood, and my father worked the night shift at the Jeep plant for 32 years, and I remember the exact smell of grease and coffee that clung to his clothes when he came home. If you have ever been told by a parent that you are on your own, or if you have ever felt the cold silence of a father who simply stopped calling, please subscribe and stay with me, because I need to tell you what I found at the very end. My mother died when I was 14, a sudden aneurysm on a Saturday afternoon in July 1986, and after that, my father became a ghost in his own house, quiet and mechanical, going through the motions of raising a teenage boy. On my 18th birthday, he sat me down at the kitchen table, handed me a $100 bill, and said, "You're a man now, David, and men take care of themselves." And I didn't see his face again for more than 2 decades. By my own honest accounting, I built a life on that rejection. I dropped out of community college, worked construction, married a woman named Brenda who left me after 3 years, and spent my 30s bouncing between rentals on the east side of Toledo. I did not attend my father's second wedding, did not meet his new wife, a woman named Patricia from the accounting department, and I did not call when I heard he had retired from the plant and moved to a small house in Sylvania Township. The antagonist of my story was my father's silence itself, a cold, efficient dismissal that I interpreted as a verdict on my worth, and I swore I would never need him for anything, not his money, not his advice, not his love. I worked at Jefferson Junior High School for 19 years, mopping floors and fixing broken lockers, earning $22.50 an hour, paying $800 a month for a cramped apartment on Detroit Avenue. I had 2 children, Sarah and Michael, from a brief relationship with a woman named Diane, and I did my best to be present for them, determined to break the cycle of silence that had defined my own childhood. But the silence from my father was a wound I carried every single day, a low-grade ache that flared up when I saw other fathers at school events or heard stories of families who actually spoke to each other. According to a recent Cornell study, 27% of American adults are estranged from a family member, and research from Ohio State shows fathers are 22% more likely to be estranged from a daughter than a son. But no, the statistic prepared me for what I found. I never visited my father in the nursing home, never called, never even asked about him, because I had convinced myself that a man who rejects his own son on his 18th birthday has no right to expect anything in return. The nursing home was Willow Creek Manor in Maumee, Ohio, a clean but sterile facility that cost $6,500 a month, and I later learned Patricia had left my father 2 years after he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Patricia had taken their savings account and moved to Florida with a man named Gary, and my father was left alone in that facility, his mind deteriorating, with no one to visit him except the nurses and the occasional chaplain. Carol, the night supervisor, told me that my father had been asking for me for months, repeating my name over and over, even when he forgot what year it was or what city he lived in. She said, he kept that envelope in his nightstand, and he would hold it every night before he went to sleep, and he told me it was the most important thing he owned. I didn't know what to say, because I had spent so many years convincing myself that my father didn't love me, that his silence was final, that there was nothing left between us but a void. Carol handed me the envelope, a small brown thing with my name written in my father's shaky handwriting, and I opened it with hands that were trembling more than I wanted to admit. Inside was a single piece of paper, yellowed and folded, and written on it in my father's blocky script was a name, Evelyn Marie Dawson, and a date, August 14, 1964. I had never heard that name before, and I stared at it for a long moment, trying to understand why my father had left me a stranger's name instead of an apology or a letter or an explanation. Carol looked at the paper and said, "Oh, that's his mother's name. His mother's maiden name had talked about her sometimes. Said she was the only person who ever truly loved him." I realized then that my father had never told me his mother's name, never spoken a single word about his childhood, and I understood that the silence between us was not a beginning but an inheritance. I went home to my apartment on Detroit Avenue and sat at my small kitchen table, holding the paper in my hands, and I began to search for Evelyn Marie Dawson online, typing the name into my phone. I found a death certificate from 1973, listing her as a resident of a mental institution in Columbus, Ohio, where she had been committed in 1965 after a diagnosis of severe postpartum depression. The document listed my father, Arthur Coleman, as her only child, and it said she had been institutionalized when my father was just 10 years old, a boy left alone with a father who was described as unfit in the state records. My grandfather, William Dawson, was a violent alcoholic who worked at a meatpacking plant, and he had abandoned my father to foster care after his mother was taken away, never to be seen again. I realized that my father, Arthur Coleman, had been 10 years old when he lost his mother to an institution, 12 when his father disappeared, and 14 when he was placed with a foster family who treated him like cheap labor. He never told me any of this, never spoke of his mother Evelyn, never mentioned the years of foster care, the institutions, the silence that had been forced upon him from the time he was a child. I thought about my 18th birthday, the $100 bill, the words, "Men take care of themselves," and I realized he was not rejecting me, he was simply repeating what he had been taught, because no one had ever cared for him either. The name my father left me was not a clue to money or a hidden asset, it was the name of the woman who had loved him, the only person who had shown him kindness before the state took her away. My father left me his mother's name because he wanted me to know that he had loved me, that he had known what love was, because she had shown it to him before the world broke him. I sat at my kitchen table and wept, not for the money I didn't inherit, but for the little boy my father had been, the 10-year-old who watched his mother be taken away and never saw her again. The National Council on Aging estimates that nearly 5 million older Americans experience abuse or neglect each year, and financial exploitation costs victims roughly $30 billion annually, but emotional abandonment leaves a different kind of scar. I had spent 23 years resenting a man who had never been taught how to love, a man who had been broken by a system that failed him at every turn, a man who still, in the fog of Alzheimer's, held onto his mother's name. I went to the cemetery the next day, to a small plot in Toledo Memorial Park, and I stood over my father's fresh grave, and I apologized to him for all the years I had stayed silent. I knelt down and placed my hand on the cold grass and said, "I understand now, Dad. I understand who you were and what you lost, and I'm sorry I never asked, never tried to know you. I cannot undo the 23 years of silence, cannot go back and ask the questions I was too afraid to ask, but I can honor the name he left me, the woman who loved him." I went to the state archives in Columbus and found records of Evelyn Marie Dawson, my grandmother, and I traced her life before the institution, a young woman who loved to sing and played the piano. I found a photograph of her in a church directory from 1962, a beautiful woman with dark hair and sad eyes, standing beside a 10-year-old boy who looked just like my father. That photograph is now on my nightstand, next to the envelope my father left me, and I look at them both every night before I go to sleep, a reminder of the love that was always there. I showed the photograph to my children, Sarah and Michael, and I told them the story of their great-grandmother Evelyn, and their grandfather Arthur, and the silence that was really a shield. I told them that I had been wrong about my father, wrong about who he was and why he left, and that being wrong had been the most painful and healing lesson of my life. The theme is clear. Silence is not the same as absence of love, and a heart that is broken is often a heart that has never learned how to heal itself. I will never get the 23 years back, will never hear my father's voice again, but I have his mother's name, and that name has given me back my father in a way I never expected. I do not need revenge or vindication or a courtroom battle to prove I was right because I was wrong, and admitting that has set me free from the anger I carried for so long. The quiet vindication of this story is not that I was right, but that I was willing to be wrong, willing to see my father through the eyes of the little boy he once was, and to forgive. So I ask you directly, who in your life have you silently judged? Who have you dismissed as cold or unloving? And what might their silence really be protecting? I think about all the years I could have visited, all the phone calls I could have made, all the questions I could have asked if I had only known what I know now. The National Council on Aging reports that about 1 in 10 older Americans experience abuse or neglect, and many of them are isolated from family who simply stopped calling and never looked back. My father was one of those statistics, a man whose final years were spent in a sterile room, remembering only the name of his mother and the son who never came to visit him. But I am here now, and I am telling this story because I want other people to ask the questions I was too afraid to ask, to bridge the silences before it is too late. My father didn't leave me money, didn't leave me a house, didn't leave me a single asset that I could hold in my hands and count, but he left me something far more valuable. He left me a name, the name of the woman who showed him love, and he gave me the gift of understanding his silence, and I will carry that gift with me for the rest of my life. I am going to visit the institution where my grandmother spent her last years, to find her grave, to place a flower on the earth that holds the woman who taught my father how to love. And I am going to write a letter to my father, a letter I will leave on his grave, telling him that I finally understand, that I forgive him, and that I am sorry for all the years I wasn't there. I am also going to write a letter to my children, Sarah and Michael, telling them the story of their grandfather and the grandmother they never met, and the silence that was really love. Because silence can be love, and distance can be protection, and a name on a piece of paper can be more valuable than any treasure the world can offer. That is what my father taught me, in the end, from a hospital bed in a nursing home, holding on to the name of his mother until his very last breath. He was not a cold man, not a distant man, not an unloving man. He was a broken man, a man who never learned how to be a father because his own father had abandoned him. And I will not let that cycle continue, will not let the silence pass to my children, because I have seen what silence does, and I will break it with the truth. The truth that my father loved me, even when he couldn't say it, even when he couldn't show it, even when all he could do was hand me $100 bill and turn away. I am at peace with my father now, at peace with the years of silence, and at peace with the name he left me, because that name has given me more than I could ever have imagined. If you have ever felt abandoned by a parent, or if you have ever wondered why someone you loved went quiet and cold, I ask you to consider what might be hiding beneath the surface. Consider the broken child inside the broken parent, the wounds that were never healed, the love that was never taught, and the silence that was never meant to hurt you. I will never know exactly what my father went through after his mother was taken away, but I know it broke him in ways he could never fully repair. And I know that he tried, in his own way, to protect me from that same brokenness, to push me away so that I wouldn't depend on him and be let down as he had been. It was a flawed strategy, a painful one, but it came from a place of love, a twisted and broken love, but love nonetheless, and I can finally see it for what it was. The nursing home called at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday, and a woman named Carol handed me an envelope, and inside was the key to understanding my father's entire life. The key was not a fortune, not a secret, not a dramatic confession. It was simply a name, the name of his mother, the woman who loved him, the woman he never stopped loving. And that name has unlocked my heart, has opened the door to forgiveness, has shown me that love is not always spoken, but it is always there, waiting to be discovered. I discovered it too late for my father, but I discovered it in time for my children, and that is the gift I will carry forward for the rest of my life. I will tell my children the story of their grandfather Arthur, and his mother Evelyn, and the silence that was really a shield protecting a broken heart. I will tell them that sometimes the people who push us away are the ones who need us the most, and that asking questions is always better than assuming the worst. I will tell them that I was wrong about my father, and that being wrong is not a failure but an opportunity to grow, to heal, to understand. And I will tell them that I love them, openly and without reservation, because I know now that love unspoken is love wasted, and I will not waste a single moment more. I want to thank Carol, the night supervisor, for giving me the envelope, for telling me about my father's final months, for being there when I was not. She could have thrown it away, could have ignored the old man's ramblings, but she didn't. And her kindness has changed my life in ways she will never know. I will write her a letter, thanking her for what she did, and I will tell her that she gave me back my father, even after he was gone. My father's name was Arthur Coleman, and he was a man who worked the night shift at the Jeep plant, a man who lost his mother at 10, and a man who did his best with what he had. And I am proud to be his son, proud to carry his mother's name in my heart, and proud to finally understand the love that was always there, hidden beneath the silence. The National Council on Aging found that elder abuse is vastly underreported, with only 1 in 14 cases ever coming to light, and I wonder how many fathers and mothers are suffering alone. I wonder how many sons and daughters are staying away, convinced that silence means rejection, when it might mean something entirely different. I was one of those sons, staying away because I thought I wasn't wanted, when my father was holding on to the name of his mother and hoping I would come back to him. And I will live with that regret for the rest of my life. But I will also live with the lesson that regret taught me. Do not assume, do not judge, do not stay silent. Because silence is a two-way street, and I was silent too, and my silence was just as loud as his, and I have to own that and make peace with it. I have made peace with it, finally, after all these years, and that peace is the quiet vindication that I never expected to find in a nursing home at 3:07 a.m. The quiet vindication was not a fortune, not a revenge, not a dramatic confrontation. It was the simple discovery that my father loved me, and that I had been wrong about him. And being wrong has set me free, has opened my heart, has made me a better father to my own children, and that is the true inheritance my father left me. He left me a name, and that name has given me everything I needed to understand, to forgive, and to love, even when love was hidden beneath years of silence. So I ask you, the viewer, to think about the silences in your own life, and to ask yourself what might be hiding beneath them, waiting to be discovered. I ask you to call the person you have been avoiding, to ask the questions you have been too afraid to ask, and to do it before it is too late. Because it was too late for me, and I will carry that regret forever, but I will also carry the lesson that regret taught me, and I will not make the same mistake again. I will call my children every week, will visit them, will tell them I love them, because silence is not a legacy I want to pass on to the next generation. My father did not know how to love, but I do, and I will use that knowledge to break the cycle of silence that has haunted my family for 3 generations. Evelyn Marie Dawson, my grandmother, was a woman who loved to sing and play the piano, and she gave my father the gift of knowing what love felt like. And I am so grateful to her, so grateful to the woman I never met, because her love was the seed that eventually grew into my understanding, even if it took decades to bloom. I will honor her memory, and my father's memory, by living a life of openness and love, by speaking the words that my father could never say. I love you is a simple sentence, but for my father, it was impossible, and I understand why now, because he never heard it from his father, and he never learned to say it to me. But I am learning, and I am teaching my children, and that is the legacy that will outlast the silence, the distance, the years of separation. My father's name was Arthur Coleman, and he was not a perfect man, but he was a man who loved his mother and remembered her name until the very end. And he loved me, even when he couldn't show it, even when he pushed me away, even when all he could offer was a $100 bill and a sentence about being a man. That was his way of loving me, a broken and flawed way, but love nonetheless, and I will honor that love by living a life that he would be proud of. I will not be defined by his silence, but by my understanding of it, and by my determination to break the cycle for my own children. The nursing home called at 3:07 a.m. on a Tuesday, and the world changed, not because I received a fortune, but because I received a name. That name was Evelyn Marie Dawson, my grandmother, and she was the key to unlocking everything I needed to know about my father and about myself. I am David Coleman, 51 years old, and I am finally at peace, finally free, finally able to say that I was wrong, and that being wrong was the greatest gift I ever received. So I will close this story with a simple lesson. Silence is not the same as absence of love, and a name on a piece of paper can be worth more than any treasure in the world. I will leave a flower on my father's grave, and I will read the name Evelyn Marie Dawson out loud, and I will tell him that I understand, that I forgive, that I love him. And I will ask my children to do the same, to visit their grandfather's grave, to learn his name, to know his story, to break the silence that haunted him. Because silence is a cycle, and cycles can be broken, and I am breaking mine, one step at a time, one word at a time, one name at a time. My father gave me his mother's name, and I will give it to my children, and they will give it to theirs, and the name will live on, long after the silence has faded. That is the quiet vindication of this story, not a dramatic payoff or a vengeful confrontation, but a quiet, peaceful understanding that heals the wounds of the past. I am healed, finally, after all these years, because of a name, because of a nursing home call at 3:07 a.m., because of a father who loved me even when he didn't know how to say it. And I hope that you, the viewer, can find that same healing in your own life, that you can bridge the silences and ask the questions, and find the names that will set you free. Because freedom is not about money or revenge or proving you were right. It is about understanding and forgiveness and love, even when love is hidden. My father's love was hidden, but it was there, and now I know it, and that knowledge has set me free. So, thank you, Arthur Coleman, for the name you left me, and thank you, Evelyn Marie Dawson, for the love you gave him, and thank you, Carol, for giving me the chance to understand. I will carry this story with me forever, and I will share it with anyone who will listen, because it is a story of hope and redemption, and the power of a single name. If you have a story like this in your own family, I encourage you to share it, to speak it, to let the truth finally set you free from the weight of silence. Because silence can be a prison, but the truth can be a key. and I hope you find the key that unlocks the story of love in your own life. I am grateful for Carol, for her kindness, for her care, for giving me the envelope that changed everything I thought I knew. I am grateful for my grandmother, Evelyn Marie Dawson, for the love she gave my father, even though she was taken from him too soon. And I am grateful for my father, Arthur Coleman, for the name he left me, the gift that unlocked my heart and set me free. I will never forget that night, never forget the call, never forget the name that changed everything. And I will spend the rest of my life honoring that name, telling that story, and breaking the silence that my father could never break. That is my purpose now, my mission, my quiet vindication, and I will carry it with pride. So I say this to you from my heart to yours: silence is not the same as absence of love, and sometimes the quietest gifts are the ones that mean the most. My father gave me a name, and that name has given me everything I needed to understand the love he could never put into words. And that is more than enough, more than I ever expected, more than I ever deserved. I will leave you with this thought. What name is waiting for you? What silence is hiding a love you have yet to discover? Go find it, before it is too late, because the gift of understanding is the greatest gift of all. Thank you for listening to my story, and thank you for being part of my journey from silence to understanding. If you have ever felt unloved by a parent, I urge you to look deeper, to ask questions, to find the names that may unlock your understanding. Because love is often hidden, but it is always there, waiting for you to find it. I found it in a nursing home at 3:07 a.m., in a name written on a piece of yellowed paper. And I will never let go of it, never forget it, never stop honoring it. This is the story of how a nursing home call at 3 a.m. changed my life, and how a name became the greatest inheritance I could ever receive. I am David Coleman, and I am at peace. My father's name was Arthur, and his mother's name was Evelyn, and I am proud to carry their names in my heart for the rest of my life. The silence is broken, the cycle is ended, and the love is finally understood. That is the quiet vindication I never expected, and it is more than enough. So go and break your own silences and find the names that will set you free. Because freedom is waiting for all of us, just on the other side of the questions we are afraid to ask. I asked my questions too late, but I asked them, and that is what matters. And now I will live the rest of my life without silence, without regret, without the weight of unanswered questions. My father left me a name, and that name has given me the greatest gift of all, understanding. And understanding, I have learned, is the only inheritance that truly matters.